I will not ask you a show of hands, but how have you liked sinning so far? And I agree with most of you that this sermon series on sinning like a Christian is not fun. And like I said when we started, sin is a topic that people in the church avoid like the plague. Because it's hard enough to get people to even come to worship, and when they get here, we don't want the worship experience to be a downer. I mean, we really don't. Or we avoid it because other religious traditions sort of use sin as this theological hammer to, as I like to say, to scare the hell out of people, literally and figuratively. And our intent is to do neither one of those. And I hope and I pray that we can address this tricky subject with a sort of a grace that doesn't make anyone feel bad, but sort of maybe just of awareness that sin affects our lives directly and it affects us indirectly as well. And my prayer is that we walk away with maybe just a better understanding of sin and how sin influences our life on a daily basis, regardless if it's your sin or you are dealing with the sins of another person. The thing about sin is it usually leaves innocent victims in its wake. The other thing about sin, part of its DNA, is that it's so much easier to notice it in the lives of other people than it is in the lives of ourselves. And so as awkward as this may be, as downing as this may be, as bummer this is, let's continue looking at the 7 deadly sins. And last week we began with pride, one of the most dangerous sins of all, and that's why they listed it as the first. And today we're going to look at envy. If pride is the most dangerous sin, then I believe envy is the sneakiest, the most slickest of all sins, because it is so hard to detect. And here's why. In the ancient Old Testament times, they believed that sin was only actions. That was it. I mean, it wasn't a part of the heart. I mean, you could feel or think anything you wanted, but you were only judged by God by your actions, what you actually did or didn't do. And then Jesus comes along and says, no, that's not really how it works. If you feel it in your heart, if you think it in your mind, it is just the same as the action. And it's hard in the culture that I grew up in it's hard to accept that. Because, we could say anything we wanted about a person. We could say the nastiest, gossip, meanest thing ever. But if we ended our sentence with, bless their heart. Or if we ended our sentence was, that boy just ain't right. We were okay. We were good. But Jesus says, look, if you think it, or if you feel it, the world may never know, but God knows. And it's still a sin. Ouch. That is tough. And envy is a sin that is 100% unnoticeable because we have been great at covering our feelings. We can smile and say everything is okay, but deep down we know it's not. Envy is not outright noticeable. Envy is of the heart, and it brews, and it stews, and it grows if we just don't admit it. And Jesus uses an example of envy in a parable. We're going to look at it today. And remember, parables are stories. They're stories that Jesus used to teach or explain something. Sometimes when we read a parable, the danger is we believe that it's true or that it really happened. And Jesus is just telling a story to get something deeper across. And so we forget that sometimes. We focus on the story and not the lesson that Jesus is trying to relay to us. So if you will, turn to me to the 20th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. You can find it in your Bibles or on the screen or on the back of your bulletin. As we begin, as Jesus tells this parable, as we begin the 20th chapter of Matthew, beginning with the first verse, Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 o'clock in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He said to them, 'You also go out and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the exact same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and he found still others standing around. He asked them, 'Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?' 'Because no one will hire us,' they answered. He said to them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, 'Call all the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first.' The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and they received the denarius. So when they came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received the denarius. And when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. 'Those who were hired last worked only an hour,' they said, 'and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat all day long.' But he answered one of them, 'I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Well, take your pay and go. I want to give the one who has hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" The last verse, the 16th verse, we hear over and over again as words of Jesus. As I was reminded a couple weeks ago, I was told that the relationship between an employer and an employee is not fair. It's just business. And all of us listen to this parable say, I would never do that. I would pay them for what their fair share of work was. That's fair. What they produced, and that's true. But what we totally forget, Jesus is not talking about business. Jesus is not talking even about labor wages. He begins this powerful story with 5 words that we overlook. He says the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of heaven is like. Jesus is not talking about a vineyard. He's not talking about working in the high heat. He's talking about God's kingdom. What heaven is like. Not a vineyard or labor management or however. And we learn a lot from the sin of envy because it wreaks havoc in this parable. We learn through this parable that charity rejoices and envy grieves over it. There's a reason, if you've ever traveled to a third world country, there's a reason these people were picked last. There's a reason they're still standing out there with their shovels past at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? Because they're physically unable to work probably all day. The ones that look physically fit, day laborers that are standing out looking for work, they're the ones that get hired first. But envy grieves over the charity of others. Why should that person receive the same thing or something more that I didn't get? And we see this play out in the world in which we live each and every day. You see, envy magnifies another's good fortune while it minimizes our own. We got paid for only a little work. They got paid for only a little work. I work all day. And the thing about envy is that it takes 2 individuals for envy to take place. We see something or someone that another person has. And it just kind of gnaws at us. It just kind of nibbles at us. It just kind of grinds away at our conscience. And it becomes more personal than any other sin that I think of. And where pride is about us, envy is sneaky. Because it's the other person we're envy of, not the good fortunes they may receive. I know of a young man whose wife died tragically at a very, very young age by the pure neglect of the hospital. It left him devastated and alone. It left him to raise his daughter all by himself. And in the process, he received a very large multi-million-dollar settlement from the hospital, as they clearly admitted they had messed up. Admitted their wrong, admitted their negligence, and so they awarded him, without going to court, this big settlement. And after being out of work for about 6 to 8 weeks, he returns to work. And one of his co-workers actually said out loud, "He is so lucky. I can't believe it. He is so lucky. He gets all the breaks. I wish something like that would happen to me." Now, I can't believe they said it out loud. Bless their heart. They just ain't right. But I know for a fact, I can testify, he would rather have the love of his life and the mother of his daughter still alive over amount of money. Can you see how sneaky envy is? It's sneaky. And one of the things that we know about envy, if you look at it and study it, that it breeds on proximity. It breeds on spot proximity. Meaning, research shows us that envy breeds faster and greater, are you ready for this? In small towns. In small towns. It's the sinfulness of envy. You see, living in a small town, I don't envy Bill Gates. I don't, because his riches are so big and so far and so vast and so above me and so far away. I don't have to drive by his house every day. I don't have to see his cars. But if my neighbor gets a zero turn riding lawnmower or a new car, then I have to walk out by it every single day to take out my garbage. Can you see how envy begins to breed? And consumerism, its only functionality is to be able to use envy. We purchase something not because we need it or we want it, but we purchase it because we see someone else with it. And we want to have it. Advertisings know that today, it doesn't matter if it's a shirt, it doesn't matter if it's electronics, it doesn't matter if it's a church. They don't need to get everyone to buy into it. All they need, and experts will tell you, is they need 3 people. 3 people. But it has to be the right 3 people. And if they can get the 3 people to come, if they can get the 3 people to buy it, if they can get the 3 people to wear it, then everybody else in the small community will want to come to that church, or want to buy that iPad, or want to wear that shirt they're wearing. That's all they need is 3. Envy is so sneaky. It is sneaky that it's not all. It's a lot about materialism, but it's not all about materialism. Monks who live in monasteries and a monastic life, monks who eat the same food, who sleep in the same bed, who wear the exact same clothes each and every day, confess that envy was the greatest of their sins. They were envious of another's presence. They were envious of another's stature and demeanor. Demeanor. And they don't even speak to each other. Think about that. I hear it sometimes in all faith communities when I hear someone say in a faith setting when they say, "Do you know how long I've been a member?" So I guess you were hired in the morning, and not in the evening. Another strange phenomenon about sin of envy is that it's mainly a same-sex sin. Let me repeat that, or let me clarify that. Men are more envious of other men, and women are more envious of other women. I do not know why, nor will I ever try to explain it. It just is. And so no matter if it's co-workers or spouses or neighbors or family members or strangers, envy is the emotional root and subtitle or a subtle form of hate. It really is. Because we begin to resent the good. We resent the good and we rejoice in the bad that occurs to someone else. It's a social sin. It's hurting our relationships. And it kills joy right in its tracks. And left unchecked, envy leads us to criticize others and attribute their success to pure luck. Or they must have cheated in some way. And that makes us passive and unmotivated to work harder for ourselves. He plays more because the coach likes him better. Envy weighs and ranks and compares, making our neighbors into competitors. And our own blessings is a kind of a prize to boast about rather than a gift of blessings to be shared. And if you live in a faith community, if you're a follower of Jesus, and even tried to divide his followers, his closest friend, said, "Jesus, tell us, who's your favorite? There's 12 of us. Jesus, come on, tell me. Who can sit at your right hand?" Envy. Let God remind us of the stinkiness of envy. And may we keep it in check. Even as our neighbors drive away in their brand new